Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. From Los Angeles, this is Adam Huss. Thanks for listening. This is a special episode of the Organic Wine Podcast because I get to introduce you to my neighborhood and two women who are at the heart of the burgeoning wine scene here. Wine and winemaking are having a renaissance in Los Angeles, and Lindsay Williams and Belen Arredondo are making sure that South Central Los Angeles is part of that renaissance. Lindsay is a doctor of nursing, a frontline worker during the pandemic, and the founder of the South LA Wine Club. Belen is a South LA Garagiste, literally making a ton of wine in her garage in South Central. And she joined Lindsay as a co-operator of the South LA Wine Club. Together, they are working to bring good wine with equity and diversity of choice to their community. I would bet lots of money that this is just the beginning of many big, bright, and beautiful wine projects that these two create and work on, both independently and together. For Lindsay and Belen, and for me, wine is about connection, and the passion and compassion that those two bring to helping others connect with each other through wine is truly inspiring. Their stories will convince you that there is a beautiful and delicious future for wine in our neighborhood and yours. Enjoy. Lindsay, Belen, thanks for joining. Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much.
Hey guys. So, I was thinking this is a special episode for the Organic Wine Podcast because
Yes.
we're not really talking so much about wine as we're talking about like the best neighborhood in the world and the wine scene that is growing here thanks to you two very cool ladies. So I don't know, for just people who don't know you, I would love it if you could each take turns sort of introducing yourselves, how you got into wine, like where you're from and what you're doing with wine now. Actually, and before that, like I'll just admit that I just made a plate of chocolate chip cookies. Well, I just made chocolate chip cookies because Southern California houses, we don't have heat. So the way we heat up the house is we bake
You
things.
get the oven, yes, and you open the oven door and let the heat permeate.
I'm jacked up on sugar and chocolate. What are you guys jacked up on right now? What are you guys drinking? Maybe add that into your introduction or eating.
Lindsay, feel free to go first.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll introduce myself. So hi everybody. Hey folks.
Hi.
Hey Belen. Hey Adam. So I'm Lindsay Williams. I am the founder of South LA Wine Club. That I founded in 2017. I'm from LA. I'm from Gardena specifically, for those who know. So LA native, born and raised. I went to UCLA for grad school, and I got into wine at UCLA. I was doing my doctorate in nursing. And, I used wine as kind of a way to network with people. I was the youngest person in my doctoral class. I was one of the few Black people in my doctoral class. And so I would go to conferences and I would be networking and with people who, I was very intimidated by, and they were all talking about wine. And I just honestly Googled some words just to try to figure out some vocabulary to have something to hobnob with these people with. And I took a trip to Temecula, probably I want to say in 2015, when I actually got it. Because at the time I was just talking about wine, I just had words. I was a poser, I'll say it, and just to kind of going along to get along. And then I went to Temecula in 2015, and I said, oh, this is what wine is actually about. Like, oh, okay, I get it now. And once that thing clicked, it was like, okay, so what tastes like this? What tastes like that? What tastes like that? And that just kind of set me off on my path as a wine lover, as a wine collector, as a wine professional. And like I said, I'm from Gardena, so I actually got my own place in South LA, South Central, and I use those terms interchangeably, and I think Belen will too, and we can kind of talk about that. So I moved here officially in 2016 and was looking for a community around wine and didn't really find anything. So I went to Meetup kind of on a whim and just said, call it South LA Wine Club. Just looking for people, like-minded people in the community. And I checked it a month later, it had 50 people in it. So I started in 2017, just started planning small kind of meetup events. And it's grown from there into curating my own events, into my growth as a wine professional, and into just this world and a community that I am super passionate about and I love um, um, infinitely. And it definitely is where I'm supposed to be and where I'm meant to be. I will say too, I'm also a nurse, so I've been a nurse for 10 years as well. And I'm working during COVID and this whole year of uncertainty that 2020 has been. And wine has been a balm, I'll say, during this time, because honestly, like back in March, April, May, I thought my palate was broken. I would taste wine, it would just everything would taste like dirt, which was just kind of just the nature of the time. But I will say, like, this community that I have, and like you, Adam, and you, Belen, you all have been such key and instrumental people in kind of getting me through this period. And wine too has gotten me through it. Just the wine community this year in 2020 has had such a reckoning and such a such just instrumental movement that I'm very proud to be a part of, and I'm very proud to represent South LA and South Central in this process as well. So that's a little bit about me. And I will say, okay, so what I'm drinking. All right, you can't see it, but I'm gonna describe it to you. It's called Kamusha. It's from a Zimbabwean Psalm called Tinashe, and excuse me, I'm gonna butcher his name, Nyamudoka. This is his 2019 Cab Sensol blend. So this is 76% Cab, 24% Sensalt from 2019, like I said, naturally fermented and vegan. It's imported through Amy Atwood. So they just started importing this a couple of months ago. So I got this specifically from Adams Wine Shop here in West Adams. So it's a delicious bottle. And I'm easy drinking it. I had my dinner earlier, so I'm drinking it by itself because I knew I had this lovely session to be a part of. So I want to have some wine
Nice.
to join me on this journey.
Well, you're like,
That's
so
it.
you're a frontline worker, a nurse, and the starter of a wine club. You're a true hero of mine and everyone's, I think, who's listening. That's very cool. There's so many things we could dig into from what you've already said, but Belen, you should introduce yourself.
Sure thing. And yes, I agree with you, Adam. Lindsay is definitely a powerhouse in her own right. So definitely in awe of this amazing woman. Um, so as I mentioned to you before, Adam, I did not grow up drinking wine. I wasn't around wine. I come from a Mexican household, and my parents and family primarily drank beer and tequila, a lot of really great tequila. Um,
Mhm.
every once in a while, mezcal, but that stuff is kind of like gasoline. It's just too hard. But um, so I was going out with friends, and friends would have drinks, cocktails, and I never really drank. So I partnered up with my current partner, and we would go out, and he suggested that it'd be nice if I found something for myself just to enjoy myself, and I was drawn to wine for many different reasons. I started off tasting and having a lot of Spanish wines. I couldn't find a lot of Mexican wine, so I would go naturally to more Spanish regions, Argentina, Chile, things of that nature. Really enjoyed it, and then moved into having more of the European wines, French wines, Italian wines, and finally really discovered what California had to offer and just fell in love with it. I grew up in Los Angeles in a little hub like Little Armenia, close to Los Feliz and Hollywood.
Mhm.
And just seeing the wine scene there, the bars popping up, wine bars, um, really got me excited, and I really enjoyed having all of that at my fingertips. My partner and I recently moved to, and I say recently, but it's been 3 years now, to
Yeah.
what I was introduced at South Los Angeles, South LA, and later I found out no, it's actually South Central. Um, moved here and was looking for a similar scene that I was used to and didn't find anything. And that's how I actually found Lindsay through Meetup, because I was looking for wine bars or some sort of group that I can integrate with and work with. Because otherwise, I thought, fuck it, I'm just going to create it myself. Right. So I was really happy to have met Lindsay through South LA Wine Club, and our relationship just blossomed from there. And yeah, so I currently work for one of the largest nonprofits in Los Angeles that works with servicing those that are homeless. And I handle all of their compliance and data. But given the recent COVID pandemic, I was working very closely with a lot of these project room key sites, a lot of hotel sites, helping folks who were on the streets, who were homeless, very vulnerable, to place them in these isolated sites. So I got an opportunity to work with the individuals directly versus just kind of being behind the scenes, right behind a computer, numbers, things of that nature. So it was a very, I don't want to say rewarding because obviously this was not a really good time, but it really just brought a lot of things to perspective. And when I moved to South Central, I couldn't believe the level of poverty and the things that I was so used to having that I thought naturally you would find anywhere and everywhere. So, long story short, in meeting Lindsay and really wanting to do something around wine and thinking that I can bring something to the community, and I thought, what brings people together? And I thought wine does that, right? In many circles and many avenues. And then you go into the agricultural piece and all that that brings. I was really excited about it and decided that I want to open my own wine bar. And then COVID hit, so I had to pivot and I decided, okay, I'm going to start making wine. And that is what I started doing this year. And my wine right now is currently in barrel. So really excited and tasting,
Woohoo!
yeah, tasting really good. Thank God I didn't fuck it up royally. So we'll see what happens next year. But I'm currently drinking your Centrala's Siren,
Ooh,
and it's
yay.
delicious. Yes, it's a Pinot Noir 2019 from Spear Vineyard in Santa Rita Hills, which I drive by every time I go to Quito because I currently pour there. Um,
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. You didn't mention that as you were saying, but you do spend weekends working for a kind of interesting winery too at times, right? Or
yes,
have?
yes. I work part time at Quito, and Tara, who is the winemaker, is just an amazing woman. And then she and her wife, Mireia, also have their own winery and wine label through Camins to Dreams. And these two women have been super instrumental and just so helpful. And so many other people in this industry that have really helped me along in this process. Justin from Lumen Wines and currently at H and Peaks, she was just everybody has been so kind. I cannot tell you enough, Adam. And a gal named
That's
Nancy also in Paso who just started her label. So I've had so many individuals really reach out and be extremely supportive when I reached out. But I would say Sweetser Cellars, Michael from Cellars was kind of like the catalyst to really helping me because I was trying to find out if anybody, again, I didn't know anything about wine, right? I don't come from drinking wine and I don't have that kind of experience. So when I started learning that folks made wine out of the garage and that was kind of like the norm, I thought, really? So I found a local producer that actually was doing it from his apartment in West Hollywood, who lived on the second floor, and they were pressing grapes in the carport downstairs. So I reached
yeah.
out, and this is Sweetser Cellars. They now have a place in Lompoc, but yeah, it was Michael that really kind of like spearheaded
Oh,
initially.
that's great. That's very cool. Yeah, I have made a few batches of wine in West Hollywood apartments myself.
Oh,
Oh yeah, I've been like a home winemaker since I don't know 2007 or something like that. So it's yeah, that's a whole other story. But yeah, I know that feeling. I've stained my walls red. I've had carboys explode. It
oh
looks like
no.
crime scenes, you know. you walk home like just, when you're learning and you don't know, what to look for, you're doing things at the wrong time and you're pressurizing things that shouldn't be pressurized. And like I'll put something in a big carboy and then go to work and come home and the carboy's exploded and it
Oh
literally just
no.
looks like blood splatter, like a serial killer came through. Some of the fun learning experiences. um, that's cool. You guys, I mean, I listened to everything that you guys are doing, and my next question is: have you both signed deals with the devil or something to have the extra time in your life? That I cannot believe the amount of stuff that you guys are doing, which is awesome. You know, you both brought it up, so I want to just jump right into it. What is the difference between South LA and South Central? Who wants to jump in?
Mm, mm.
Lindsay, you
Good
said you'd be
question.
willing to dive into that,
Yeah,
Lindsay.
yeah,
Why don't
yeah.
you go for
So
it?
no, that it's an excellent question. So for me, to me, and I'll describe it. There isn't or isn't. There's a nuance, right? So
Right.
so the name in the 80s and 90s was South Central, which had its own kind of a level of fame and notoriety, be that negative or positive, depending on the person. Based off the fame of Dr. Dre and NWA and Snoop Dogg and all of that, and shows like back in the day, like South Central. There was a show called South Central itself. So it had kind of the notoriety, but it was um, for some considered pejorative and negative because it was seen as a quote unquote hub for crime and salaciousness and excessive alcohol use, which literally the laws that were placed back in the 80s and 90s to curb what was seen as this salacious behavior still affects us here today, because the ability to get a liquor license, the ability to open anything here in South LA, South Central, is based off of that precedent that was
Mhm.
based off of back then. So at that time it was South Central, so you would say you're from South Central. And then maybe in the early 2000s, 2010s, there was a kind of a rebranding that happened, as a function of trying to rebrand and get away from maybe a negative stereotype, that it became South LA. And then that in itself became, and again, this is me, this is Lindsay Williams, South LA Wine Club, saying these things, is that once it started to be called South LA, that had its own set of negative connotations, because it felt like, okay, so why are we trying to gentrify or change the name of the area, that this is what it's always has been. This is what the people have called it this whole entire time. So to call it South LA was kind of seen as a way to potentially gentrify this area and call it something other than what it was actually called. So for me,
Right.
that's why I use both. The name of my business is South LA Wine Club, but I use South Central LA and South LA interchangeably because I'm hearkening to both of those names. Because there's some
Yeah.
people who, obviously, who feel that pride in South Central, and I too, I feel that pride in South Central. I'm, like I said, I'm from Gardena, which is a hop, skip, and a jump down the street. So this is where I grew up. I live 5 minutes away from my grandmother's house, where I spent many a holiday. So at that time, it was South Central. And but then South LA kind of represents this new kind of name for it, which for some, again, represents a pejorative connotation, but for some represents a rebirth and a renewal. And so that's, for me personally, that's why I use the two interchangeably, South LA and South Central. But if anyone asks me where I live, I say I live in South Central LA.
Yeah.
That's for me personally. That's what I ascribe the value to.
Yeah. It's funny. I find myself doing exactly the same thing. So using them interchangeably.
Technically, my neighborhood is called Canterbury Knolls.
Yes.
And the adjacent neighborhood is called Hyde Park. This is not Canterbury. There are no knolls. This is not the Hyde Park that you see in London. So I feel that there was an
Oh,
attempt to ascribe this area with
Canterbury.
posh areas or higher income
Chesterfield
areas.
Square.
Chesterfield
Right.
Yes.
Square, yes, all of that. Like,
Chesterfield.
what does that even mean? To me, I mean, I live here, so what is Hyde Park? What is Canterbury? No, there's no knolls here. Like, but we have a lot of other things, but like, don't try to
Yeah.
change it from what it is. So that to me, that's how I personally use it. And I know for a lot of people it's very deeply personal. And again, I don't
Yeah.
want to offend. I want to honor all of those experiences. So for me, I use South Central LA and South LA
Yeah.
interchangeably.
Yeah. Um, Belen, you moved here, a couple years ago. What was your impression? I mean, you said you had some impressions. It sounded like, you know, and this is a question for both of you. How, like, for people who haven't been here, who haven't driven these streets, what can you say? Like, what are the opportunities? What are the challenges in this community?
Well, Adam, I will say that when we were starting our house search, um, this particular area was coming up, but it was coming up as South Los Angeles, right? So I didn't have any idea that it was South Central, right? And to
Yeah.
be honest, outside of what I had heard about the riots and different rap groups, from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, I didn't really have like an understanding because I didn't live here, right? I really stayed in my little hub of the world. So when I moved here, I mean, we fell in love with our home. It's this cute little two-bedroom, one bath in what seems to be many homes, small little homes, family homes, a lot of families, a lot of generations living in homes here. So I thought that was very sweet, coming from a place that now is riddled with apartment buildings, luxury apartments, right? So this was just very sweet. Um, but again, priced out of the market, not being able to afford Los Feliz, right? Not being able to afford now even the Valley. Um,
Hmm.
I didn't know about this area. I didn't think about it. So was really happy just in general, like to be excited, right? To be a homeowner. Um,
Yeah.
so I didn't have any thoughts about it one way or the other. What ended up happening to us is actually when we started moving in, people were giving us kind of like these funny looks because here are these two young individuals that don't look anything like what folks perceive to be as Mexicans come into this neighborhood. So automatically we were gentrifying the area. And
Hmm.
I started speaking Spanish to them. My partner and I both did, and things changed a little. Um, but that was kind of like the first impression. And to be honest, we were welcomed by a homeless person who lived on the street, who used to live in the kind of backyard of our neighbor. And this gentleman is the one who actually welcomed us in. And I don't know, there was something very bittersweet about that. Um,
Hmm.
but feeling very welcomed. And then, moving here, looking around, thinking, I'm going to be able to walk to a coffee shop. I'm going to be able to walk to some organic, what I was used to,
Hmm.
and found myself that no, that wasn't the case.
Mm,
I
It's a
wanted
hmm.
it's a
fast food.
drive to get anywhere, right? Like,
Yeah, if I wanted
Yeah.
fast food or a liquor store, you have them everywhere.
right.
I really was looking for, good food, organic food, things of that nature. They were really hard to find. You have a lot
Yeah.
of large grocery store, chains, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but the selection is very different
Yeah.
than
And
I
not
guess
even a lot of them. It's kind of few and far between
they're a
compared
bit
to, I mean,
sparse. Yes.
yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we moved into our home in January of 2018, and I was kind of thinking, what am I going to do? How can I help? That's always my mindset, right? I'm an entrepreneurial at heart. And then 8 months later, in August, around the corner, this organic coffee shop and an organic store opened up, the VMPC, and I was really excited. The problem is when you walk in, I mean, these prices are pretty expensive when you think about the community and what they can or can't afford, right? So, sure, I can afford it, but it made me think, is someone really going to come in here for an organic chicken and pay $20 for it? So,
Mm,
there's still, I think, a lot of um, problems with what we have available and how it's serving the community, right?
yeah.
I think there's still a lot of opportunities there, but I was telling people that I moved to South LA, and people were actually really upset that I was even calling it South LA. They were telling me, you're actually in South Central. And I found myself having to defend, like, hey, this is what I have. This is like, I'm not just saying it to say it. I This is what I know. And
Right, right.
I mean,
This
it
is
was
what everyone
harsh.
told me. Yeah.
Yeah. And then depending on where you are, right? If you're in West Adams and you say, "Oh, I'm South LA," some people are like, "No, you're West Adams," or "No, you're not South Central." I mean, it's really hard sometimes. So at this
Yeah.
point now, it's just like Lindsay says, I'm South Central Los Angeles because um, I'm not trying to appease anyone, but I don't want to offend anybody because now this is part of my community, right? And I grew up here, so I don't feel like I'm gentrifying, although, many people think that we are. Um, but I mean, fortunately, I feel like for the most part, our neighbors, again, a lot of generations here, like individuals that are older, this is their home, this is where their kids grew up, still live here. So for me, it's very sweet to see that, to see kids and
Nice.
parents walking down the street. Um, but
Yeah, it's a real LA neighborhood in that sense. I mean, that was my big impression having moved here, going on, well, it's like 9 years this year. Um, I just for the first time, I'd bounced around LA, all different neighborhoods for, I don't know, 15 years plus. And when I moved here, it was like, oh, like people are socially active, politically active, community, there's a sense of community like I've never felt anywhere else in LA. Was welcomed by neighbors, it was just like I was like, "Oh, this is like it's like a place where you can be
Yes.
home." Like
Yes.
everywhere else in LA you
Mm.
feel transient, and then I came here and I was like, I could feel like I'm
Correct.
home here.
Correct. Because a lot of times in LA, a lot of people, if you, again, and I'll say this, I'll say north of the 10, some people aren't from LA. But when you get south of the 10, a lot of people are actually from LA.
Yeah,
And so
that's
you
true.
do feel, again, yeah, like you have neighbors a little bit more homey, a little bit more neighborhood. Like you know your neighbors, you know people, you will, you'll
Yeah,
say hi when you walk down the street and walk your dog. Like it feels, definitely feels like more of a community in a neighborhood, more of a home. And so
yeah,
that Belle and I were both from LA, at different parts of it, I think kind of added to that too, because we kind of knew where to, how that feels with just like lived in, that
yeah,
wanting neighbors and wanting a community and wanting a neighborhood. And that's what this neighborhood really provides in droves, is that, again, your neighbors. I talk to them, I speak to them, they we talk to one another. There's a quinceanera happening down the street, there's a birthday party happening down the street, like that's all just a part of the community and the neighborhood, is that people are living their lives, and they're
yeah,
ingratiated here, they're here.
I
yeah.
will say, Adam, that one of the things that um, I was shocked by is when we were inviting friends and family members over, right? Um, and they would get to our house. They were very like on their end shocked and impressed at how nice the house was. I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, like like I don't get it. Like what were you expecting? But their thinking was it's gonna
Yeah,
be this
yeah.
dilapidated, it's got probably a tear down, it's probably
Mm,
funky. Um, and it was anything but that, right? Not to say that you could find that anywhere, right? But
sure, yeah,
the expectation coming to our home was that it was going to be that, um, not what they ended up encountering. I will say that the other thing that I've noticed here is, oh my God, I'm sick and tired of all of these fucking helicopters, the fucking
oh,
cops
it
and
never
the
ends,
sirens.
it never
Oh my
ends.
God.
uh, That's like on my first podcast for this whole show is I just have a recording of a helicopter flying over because it's like this is what it sounds like where I live. That's literally my first thing on on this podcast. It's hilarious. Yeah, it's true. You know, and so well, I want to jump back to the wine club then too because Lindsay, that's kind of how I found out about you too. Is just
Hmm.
we all kind of came at this in this really organic way, sorry, pun intended, of 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 just trying to make connections with other
Yes.
like-minded people, and
Yes.
Lindsay, you provided that space. Like, literally, I just went online and was like, South LA Wine Club or something like that, because I was like, "Who how am I gonna talk to people in my neighborhood who like wine? How am I gonna find them?" And boom, I was like, "Wait, there is a meetup for that." I was, like, super surprised to find I joined right up, and then I think COVID hit or something like that, and it was like, "Oh,
Yes.
I didn't," nothing was happening. But in the meantime, um, I mean, first of all, I want to say that, and you guys can talk to that, but that sense of connection is really, the whole reason that it's been wonderful to get to know you guys, and what I think you're
Yes.
doing is so wonderful, and why I wanted to do this, because, what we're trying to do, and Belen, you even sort of alluded to this, but the agricultural piece to wine is that,
Yes.
so much of South LA, we are very urban. We're very isolated from where the food comes from, and where everything comes from, and making that connection between what's in the glass and where it was grown is really important to me, and making connection to the other people, the connection that comes from making that connection, the connections to other people, is really important to me. um but you guys, since COVID, the wine club is really, you've sort of had a whole explosion of attention and press and all kinds of stuff. But do you want to talk about that, and what's happened with the wine club in the past year, and what's happened with the attention that it's gotten and everything?
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I'll say the last event that we had back in March before COVID, the stay-at-home order, the first stay-at-home order actually began, was a South LA Wine Club event, and it was at
Yes.
Belen's house. So Belen and I live less than a mile away from one another. We could walk to one another's houses. And so after we connected after my first event last October, it hasn't even been a year, which is wild. It feels like so much longer than that. But after that first event, we had planned to do another event, which we did in March of 2020, which we featured some producers from Los Alamos, Los Olivos, Santa Barbara County, and literally that we had gone back and forth for that event as to whether we should have it, whether we should cancel it. Cases arising, everything just sort of happened so fast. And ultimately we decided just to have it because um we it was in someone's home, the number one, so we felt like we could have a certain amount of control over the capacity, a certain amount of control over who does what, who goes where. We had wipes, we had hand washing station, we had all the PPE out, we had signs, and we had label your own glass, we had all of that stuff. Again, just not knowing and being unsure of what will actually happen. And so we had that event, which was a success. And then, like, literally the day after that is when the stay at home order went into effect. So, in retrospect, I'm so glad we had that event, because that literally was my last hurrah as far as an in person event for 2020. And so, since then, I've pivoted to be online, using Instagram Live a lot as far as events, just to have series in which I can talk to winemakers, talk to people in South LA, just to talk about what we're going through, of course, because we can't all be physically together. So, a series I launched was South LA Speaks, which was literally meant to, because I was struggling. Like I said, it was COVID. I was a nurse. There was a lot of things happening at once. There was so much uncertainty. I was like, so what am I doing? Because, I saw people were launching like live tastings and Zoom tastings, which at the time seemed so foreign. And so I said, okay, so what is my contribution? How am I adding value? And how I add value is no one else is in, besides the folks that I'm talking to. Like, what is the value? It's called South LA Wine Club. So let's harvest the value that we have right here in our neighborhood. So the South LA
Mm.
Speak series was meant to highlight people who are in the neighborhood who, quite honestly, I would have been talking to anyway, but we didn't have a
Yeah.
chance to talk because we couldn't get together physically. So it was a chance to have that conversation online on Instagram Live. So my first session I had with a local therapist who had been to a couple of my events, who was a wine enthusiast herself. The other event I had with some local community activists, and we just talked about what we're going through, the challenges that we're facing, and we were all drinking the same wine. And so that was just kind of immediately the value of that. And since then, I've had more events again on Instagram Live where I'm talking to local winemakers, I'm talking to local wine enthusiasts, just having a way to connect and stay connected and drink the same wine. So it was a way to connect with people, to connect with my community, to connect with people that I would have connected with anyway, but we couldn't physically be there in person. So for me, that was a lot of 2020, just a lot of challenges as far as like, what am I doing? Thinking my palate was broken, and then kind of reframing. Another significant thing I did was I started a collaborative with some of my good dear sisters in wine that we've called Our Glass is Full, and meant to commemorate and celebrate like key events, celebrations, holidays around marginalized groups, and use that and reframe it with wine. So the main thing that we did this year was the Juneteenth Saber celebration. So we literally reclaimed the act of sabering a bottle of champagne or sparkling wine as a chance to like celebrate Juneteenth. So we had speakers, we had a sparkling wine tasting, we had a DJ. And so again, just trying to reframe and see like what we can do, now with limited contact, limited in-person contact, what events look like now, what things feel like now, and still again trying to connect with people. So that's been my year. Very long
Nice.
story.
I will say though, I will add to what Lindsay said, that one of the reasons we did move forward with having the event, because we had it March 14th and the stay at home order started the very next day, the 15th, was because folks were reaching out to both Lindsay and I like, please don't cancel it, because
Yes.
a lot of events had been canceled for people, and people were like, we don't know what's going on, we really want this to happen. So we actually had an amazing turnout.
We had a great turnout. Yeah.
And that was and we felt that between Lindsay, myself, and Pete from Final Girl Wines, um, you have folks that work in some way, shape, or form with healthcare compliance. I mean, our home looked like
Yes.
I mean, it was on point for all of the for safety purposes. But it was really interesting because the goal was to have everything outside, and so we did have a portion of it outside, and then it started pouring. So now we had to come inside. So
Yes.
and we had
The
a lot,
one
and
day that it rained this year.
yes,
Literally.
and the reality is, Adam, that we changed a lot of things. Like we
Yes.
pivoted immediately. So Lindsay handled all of the pouring of wine. I stayed. I made the food, and I stayed at the food station. So I was serving folks. Folks were not allowed to touch the food, which is very different, right? Because normally you just have a big
Exactly.
platter,
Yeah.
people kind of go and grab what they want. But this was very different. And then we had someone that was constantly cleaning doorknobs, spraying Lysol. We had someone that was taking pictures. I mean, every single one of us had a role. We were exhausted, but
Wow.
it worked out. So it was really nice to have and to share that and have that experience. And then, it was all downhill from there. And then, as you know, the rest is history.
Right. I
Well, I
will
will
say,
say. Oh,
yes.
go ahead. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go, Adam.
I
Go
want.
ahead. No.
I wanted to just say that
Yes.
I know you're joking, but there's been some really cool stuff that you guys have done even since then. Like I
Right.
mean, I wanted to highlight the Aslina tasting, the
Yes.
virtual tasting that you did, because that's just highlighting a really cool winemaker, the first black female winemaker in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Um, and you had her for a virtual tasting, which was fantastic. I tuned in for that,
Yes.
drinking
Yeah.
her wines, and I
Yeah.
think
We had Krista Scruggs. Yeah.
Adam's
We had
coffee
Adam.
shop opened up this year too,
Yep.
right? So
Yeah.
we finally have like
Adam's Coffee
somebody
Shop
who,
slash Adam's Wine Shop. Yeah. So
Adam's
right,
Wine
shout
Shop.
out to
Yep.
Rebecca
right.
Nancy, who's the wine director there, who has been such a resource. And some highs highs and lows
Yes.
in
Some highs and
in this
hoes.
year. Exactly. That's exactly 2020. You're just saying everything. Yes.
um Literally the week before they opened, I was driving home from wine country, and I was like, man, if there was only a wine shop in our neighborhood that had like cool European stuff and like, cool local stuff from California, like stuff that, and especially it would be awesome if it like focused on organics and biodynamics and like, small production, small producers. I was like, how
There
awesome
it
would
is.
that
There
be?
it is.
And like a week later, boom, I was like, oh, I'm screwed. And like now there goes all my profits from
It's like we put it onto the universe, Adam, because when I was like, "Where's my coffee shop that I can walk to?" And then, sure enough, 8 months later, I have one right around the corner, and organic at that, right?
Yeah, I know. So you guys are relatively new to this in some ways. I mean, a couple years into the wine world. So you're learning and you're growing and you're experiencing a lot of new things. And I just want to ask for both of you, what are some of the big key things that have been like pivotal things that you've learned in your wine knowledge, and what are you learning currently? Like what do you want to learn? Like where are you taking your education with wine?
Well, for me, I'm learning how to make wine, number one.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
super huge. Lindsay was really helpful, and we
Yes,
really
yes, yes.
we
Now
got to see. Yes, go
you're a
ahead.
home winemaker, right? You're not licensed yet, so this is all just learning and fun at home stuff. You
She's a
can't,
garagiste.
right? You're a
Yes.
garagiste, so but you're making a significant amount of wine, if I'm correct, right? If I'm not
Listen, you
mistaken.
go big or you go home. Um,
You go big and go home in your case.
yes,
Uh,
this is true. Um, yeah, so my grapes are from Paso Robles, the Estrella district, and two vineyards behind J. Lore. And yeah, I'm making Cabernet Sauvignon and Syrah. Um,
nice.
that's just huge, right? Just learning how to make it. But
Hmm.
It
process
really
of
is.
just doing that. I mean,
It
Lindsay
changes you
was there.
forever.
Yeah, Lindsay was there when we did harvest, and I gotta tell you, it's a lot of work, and
Yeah,
Yes.
it made me think about all of the people that are working the vineyard
right.
versus whose face is actually representing the finished product, right? And who
Yeah,
worked on the finished product. I mean, they're very different um, people, and
yeah.
it it just blew me away. And
I talk a lot about this on this podcast, right, Belen? I know
yes,
you've listened, and yeah, I think that's so important to bring out and bring attention to because I think there's so much opportunity for improvement there. Go
yeah,
on.
I
Sorry.
mean, we have a lot of these beautiful vineyards, and they are being worked on by primarily a lot of Latino, a lot of minority workers, and to some extent, potentially immigrant workers. And it's really intense. It's a lot of work, and I fortunately get to speak Spanish with them, so we have a lot of fun. But many of them, they work the vines tirelessly and they love them because they come from agriculture in some way, shape, or form. But they don't necessarily drink the wine. Uh, they they care for these vines. They put a lot of time and effort, and let's not get started on kind of like the income disparity there. But I just started thinking a lot about that and what really goes into a bottle of wine. So I bought a ton of grapes for my first trial, and just harvesting.
Literally a ton, right? Not
Right,
just a
right, right.
figurative.
Literally,
And I
yes.
tell people that it's like a ton is not hyperbole. Like, no, it was literally a
She
ton
bought
of grapes.
2,000 pounds of grapes.
Eh.
I mean, and just that process alone, there's a lot of these images on Instagram, and I posted some of them, right? About like this, la-di-da, kind of like Disneyland, beautiful, like gorgeous. But man, it's fucking hard. And
Yeah,
it, it's a lot of work. And
yeah,
I started thinking about who's tending these vines, right? So when I hear that folks are actually working on a lot of the vines and the soil and what that means. And I mean, it really blows me away. So there's definitely this bittersweet truth that comes with all of it, right? So I got to do a portion of it, And I think the next part for me to learn is more about the actual vines themselves and the vineyard and the growing process,
Hmm.
cover crop and the soil and the matter and all of that. So I think that's the next part for me to really understand. Um, because I think in terms of making wine, I mean, granted, it's at the hands of the winemaker. And again, I have been really blessed that I've had several individuals guide me through this process, right? Um, but still a lot to be learned, and I think it left me with that, that
Yeah.
thinking about the people that are working the fields and in just an agriculture in general. And I have a small little garden in my front yard, and I did this purposely because we have a lot of families here that have a lot of. You'd be surprised, a lot of people have little gardens and fruit trees. I mean, we have tons of oranges all over this neighborhood. So I just thought, wouldn't it be cool if we can barter, right? If I'm growing something and you can give me some lemons and I'll give you some basil or parsley or kale, right? So yeah, but a lot to learn still from the viticulture side and the
Yes.
agriculture part of it.
Man.
I'll say just from um, being enlisted to help with the harvesting, and I was so happy to be able to join Belen on this process of making her own wine, because this is something that we talk about quite a bit, about creating our own kind of culture and community and scene here in South LA, South Central. So being able to literally pick the wines, drive the wines down, like stomp the wines, like treat them, like it was so hands on, and I'm so appreciative of that process, because it, again, like Belen said, it makes you just so appreciative of the hands that perform this labor,
Yeah.
and it makes you
And that,
aware of the hands and the people and the feet that perform this labor, because we did it with
Yes.
our ton. Well,
yeah.
I say our because I feel partial ownership, because I'll text Billy like, how our baby's doing, she
Yes.
has her babies, of course, but like,
Yep. Yep.
this was just our ton, and
Yes.
we felt such ownership over it and such care over it, to make sure that it was shepherded through this process, of fermentation. So, just to have that happen, and so the hands, and again, the workers that touch this land, and that touch the wine, we are make sure that we're respectful of them, and in reverence of them, because again, like this is an agricultural product too. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why wine is so interesting, right? Because it's a luxury product, but it's also an agricultural product. It's also a consumer product. It's also a historical product. All these things kind of intercept with what you
Yeah.
drink
And a
and how you
cultural
drink it.
product. Yeah.
Um,
Even an
so yeah,
artistic
just being
product,
able to
perhaps.
bring these wines to Belen's house in South Central is so impactful, because we were stomping and pressing these we call it great madness, because I will say
Yes.
we were up for 24 straight hours. Like we were deliriously tired. But it
uh,
was worth it, because when I get to taste this wine, I mean, it's delicious. It's damn delicious. So I feel that ownership again over the wine, and shepherding it. So, um, yeah, it was just a real
that's very
lesson
cool.
in the labor and in the hands, again, because in South LA and South Central, um, I think and I know Belen too, feels that connection to those workers, because the people that live in this neighborhood are the ones that are exploited. Oftentimes, we are the ones who are considered lesser than. And so when I go and we make these agricultural products, I don't want to lose sight of that. I take all of that when I go and do whatever I'm doing in wine. So it was very impactful, and also was a lot of fun. Of course, I will
Yeah.
say that, because you're doing something that no one else has done before. You know, so
Yeah.
it was a great experience in that respect.
Well, I mean, I love a couple things. I love that you were just using the word wine and grapes interchangeably, because it's funny. I think that's probably something you learn in the process, is just how that connection has been made so strongly for you that there is no difference really. Like
Hmm.
you were saying wine, stomping the wine and picking the wine, and I was like, that's awesome. I love that you're saying it like that. Um, and it's so profound what both of you guys said about that. It needs no commentary. I think it's really beautiful too. I think I will also add that you might not even realize how important the knowledge that you're getting from doing that is. It really changes the way you taste wine. It changes the way you understand where flavor comes from when because so many people come to wine from the glass side. They fall in love
Yes.
with wine because they've met it in a store, in a tasting room or something like that, at a party, and they taste something that they really like, and they start learning about it. They learn about the history, from the finished product side, and then it takes years. Like, this was my journey, to work backwards to see that it all started with that soil and the labor in the vineyard. And you guys got this really profound and really important knowledge right up front, which I think is so great. And yeah, I hope everybody appreciates that. I think that's so cool that you guys already seem to appreciate it. Um, what do you want for the future? I mean, what do you see for the future in your own life, but in the neighborhood in regards to wine?
I feel like both Lindsay and I have had several discussions about this, where I think the reason we both connected so much is because we both want the same thing for this community. We want to have resources available. We want choices. We want options, right? On many fronts. But it would be great to have local wine bars, local wineries, access to wine that's good wine, right? I know we talked about this before with you, Adam. Access, it's you know,
Mhm,
not to say that there's anything wrong with some of the ones that are out there, but I'd love for there to be um, more variants and varietals in terms of what's accessible and what's available and price point and stuff being made and for people to also be able to enjoy it, right?
yeah,
I'd love to see all of that. And I'd love to be able to provide for this community some of these wines that I'm making. I'd love to continue to host events and support Lindsay and her endeavors because there's a lot that as a Latina and as a Black woman coming together in this community can do, especially as women.
mhm,
So I think there's so much opportunity, and I think a lot of people want it, and we want to see folks that look like us, right, be a part of
mhm.
this and represent it in the same fashion.
Yes,
Cool.
I would agree with Belen 100%. I think for us, in future, just wanting to make sure that we have sustainment and that we have yeah, a continual community, because it's so important that, and again, like Belen said, there's some variety in liquor stores and big box grocery stores, but of course that doesn't represent the gamut of small local, POC, BIPOC, winemakers. And so I want to highlight that as part of the work that I do. I want to make sure that there are wines that are out there in LA, even, that people in South LA and South Central LA do not have access to. So that's my goal, to make sure that we have an adequate representation of these tastes and of different varietals and of different brands, and that things
Mhm,
that feel accessible. You don't have to drive across town in order to find certain things. It is right here. And so part of that too is recognizing that this neighborhood of South LA, South Central LA, and Inglewood, we are wine buyers. We are buying a significant amount of wines. It's just that at a large scale, no one's paid attention to us, which is not fair, which is not right, because we are buying a lot of wine. Many of my customers will go to Napa every year, twice a year, three times a year. They'll go to Temecula. They'll go out to these wine areas, but no one's coming into them. And that's what this seeks to represent, is that they can come. You deserve to have all this wine right here in your neighborhood and be able to buy it as well. And so that's what I like to continue to do. And again, with Centralis and with Belen here and with me here and with Adam's Wine Shop here, there's a lot more representation here in this area, that we can get the wine to this area. Because again, like we said, with 2020, we need it. So the more
And I
variety that we have, the better.
and I will add to what Lindsay's saying in terms of folks coming here to us to service this particular community. I will say that one of the things that struck a lot of individuals that came to our only event that we hosted together prior to it is we had three winemakers here. And
Yeah.
it felt like, wow, I am important. They came down,
Mhm,
they
mhm.
took time out of their schedule to talk to everybody, to pour wine, to introduce. I mean, it was such a beautiful thing. And, to leave with that thinking like, wow, someone cares about me enough that they made the trek. Final Girl Wines came out, Pete and Anna, Serenity Farms came out,
Mhm. And
Jason
Dreamcoat.
came out, and then they also brought down Dreamcoat, all from
Yes.
the same kind of like Los Alamos, Los Olivos, Santa Barbara regions, and it was really beautiful to have that and make that accessible and available to folks. So that's another part of it, right? It's there are a lot of we have a lot of consumers here. I mean, shoot, I mean, I'll speak from the Mexican side. We love to drink. Um, buying tons of tequila and tons of beer. I mean, you just need to bring them, different levels of access of wine. As you know, there are different kinds of beer, different kinds of tequila. You want something for everybody, bring it to them. We are consumers. So it was a beautiful thing to see and for folks to walk away with. So it made me very, very proud. And like I said, that's what I want in the future and continue to collaborate with others and support each other.
That's great.
Yeah. And and I'll just add a little bit more. That is what I know that I'm all about, and Belen is all about, is that we're about collaboration. I am not in a scarcity mindset. I'm in an abundance mindset. I'm not in competition with anybody for anything, because I know if we all work together, that there's more than enough wine to go around to everybody. There's only so many grapes. There's only so
Yep.
many vineyards, and so there's more than enough people that need this wine. So I don't work in a scarcity mindset where I'm set against somebody else in this neighborhood. No, that's not my intention at all. We all work together, because if it's not for it's not, if you don't come to me, you come to my colleague, but we're all working in conjunction and in collaboration.
That's cool. I have a cool story just to sort of wind things down from coming to this neighborhood whenever that was. We were here probably we were still, working, fixing up the house. We just moved in, and our neighbors behind us invited us over for a party, and we're like, "Oh, sure, great. What's the occasion? What should we bring?" They're like, "No, we're throwing it for you guys to welcome you to the neighborhood." And we're like, "Oh, okay, that's fantastic." So we show, and like, so the whole neighbors come, and like the first gift that we got from our neighbors was a bottle of wine. And I was like, "I think we're home."
Right.
Seems about right.
That's
Um,
awesome,
Yes.
Adam.
Yeah.
yeah,
The community
yeah,
is so huge out here. It's just no one's has ever has said like, "Oh, well, you all like to drink," which is why we're here.
right.
Because there's such a spectrum of what people like, just like in any other network or any other consumer area. And not just thinking about it as like, okay, you're going to buy this, so we're going to give you this, but it's just like there's so many different tastes, and so it's so varied, and again, it hasn't been paid attention to, which is not fair, and it's
Yeah.
not equitable, which is why we're here again.
And I
Hey,
will and I will add, Adam, that Mexicans, Latinos, we love our quinceañeras. They are becoming more and more profitable than even weddings. So when you think about
Mm,
cool.
advertising wine, I mean,
Yeah,
talk about a party. Again,
yeah,
we are consumers. We love to drink. We love to party. Let's bring them as much wine to party with.
right.
yeah, I mean,
I think
and same thing
if
like with
anybody's
all with
listening, I hope they're getting it.
right. And the
I
same,
think
and the
I
same thing, with our with the black community as well across LA. I mean, it's wine is meant to signify a celebration. No matter what occasion is it, what occasion is it, and um, we are definite consumers between the Latinx community and the Black community. We are consuming and buying at just as high as a rate as any other community. So our preferences are just as important. And so, when you're thinking about this, thinking about all the different types of people that consume your wines and consume products. So that's why we're here.
Very cool. Well, you guys are doing wonderful, beautiful things, and I'm so glad that we could talk about them. How do people find out about the South LA Wine Club and about, do you want to just give your connections? I know, Belen, you have a great Instagram. I know the South LA Wine Club does. You guys want to say what those are and
Sure.
other
For
stuff?
me, it's this Latina Belen. And that's where I post everything, really. That's really the best way to get a hold of me and receive updates.
Lindsay, how do people find out about the wine club?
Absolutely. For me, my website is southlawineclub.com, and I'm on
That makes
Instagram at
sense.
South LA Wine Club, on Facebook at South LA Wine Club, pretty much South LA Wine Club, wherever you can find it.
Well,
And
that's easy.
I will say, Adam, that if folks reach out to either one of us, we tend to reach out to each other and we
Exactly.
do
Exactly.
things together.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
So we can't tell you a
Exactly, Mundo.
secret and expect the other one not to know it.
Yes.
Exactly. No, exactly. That's the collaboration communication. Again, we're not in competition. I'd be like, "Oh, did you see this?" And she'd be like, "Yes, I saw. Did you see this?" So we work very closely together because we want it to be something in that all of us can succeed.
So cool. All right. Well, guys, we're gonna do this again. We're gonna come back, like we said, and we're gonna do a part two in a year or something and see what's happened and what's
Hopefully, we
gone
can be in
on.
person and just be at someone else's house or
Oh,
in the
that would be
backyard.
Oh,
lovely, right? It'd
yes.
be
Boy, boy, boy. Please
wonderful.
wear a mask. Please wear a mask, y'all. Oh
Yeah,
man.
thank you. There you go. Closing
And
words
buy
from the
Centralis wine
nurse.
because you can just be right
Yes.
at home enjoying Centralis wine.
Hey, that's right. And if you do, Centralis is the sponsor of this podcast and helps to promote people like you guys who are doing beautiful things in the world by promoting and giving voice to your project. So there you go. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Thank,
Um,
thanks,
Thanks so
Adam.
much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Of course, of course.